Well, we're joined now by the UK's Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. Mr Wallace, thank you very much for being with us this morning. We've seen in Alex's report there just indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas. How is the war going at this stage, day 13?
Well, it's not going particularly well for the Russians. It's day 13, way off their timetable. One level, sadly, there's a lot of casualties. We've seen the indiscriminate shelling, which has obviously killed numerous civilians. We've also recognised that probably the biggest single casualties so far in the war are Russian military soldiers who have been let down by appalling leaders, appalling leadership and appalling plans, and now you see them literally at large scales dying. And I think that is something that will be interesting in the Kremlin, whether they will admit to each other the failure of their aggressive and illegal invasion of Ukraine. We've seen the column is still stuck north of Kiev. There are reports overnight of Ukrainian special forces destroying, over 20 Russian helicopters on the ground. And I think we can see that the Russians are having real logistic problems. So that affects morale. They're not getting through. They're getting more desperate, and you can see them getting more desperate because they're shelling more and more innocent people, just trying to even get out on humanitarian corridors, as we saw yesterday. And I think this goes right to the heart of the challenge for Russia, which is Russia has built itself a trap and it's sent itself in. The international community is united against them, and now we see the devastation that they're leaving behind.
We'll come on to a lot of that in a moment, but you saw in Alex's report there Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine, calling for more Western support. We're going to hear from President Zelensky later today, who will, no doubt, call for more Western support. Are we doing all we can?
Yeah, we are increasing our support of both lethal and non-lethal aid to Ukraine. We're continuing to deliver them throughout the country. We started off, obviously, with 2,000 NLAWs, that's light anti-tank weapons. We've changed and increased both the NLAWs and others, and I'll make a statement tomorrow, I think, to Parliament to give the details. But Britain is stepping up, doing that. We're supporting the coordination of delivery throughout Ukraine. We were the first, really, to do this in Europe, and we did it, obviously, early in January, way before the invasion. And so we're in a good place to make sure they get better defence and more defence. And I'm in touch with my colleague in Ukraine quite a lot to get to know what's going on and what they need.
I mean, there is some talk as well in the past couple of days of reinforcing the Ukrainian Air Force by swapping out jets, essentially, from NATO members. Poland has been mentioned, with jets that the Ukrainian Air Force can use. Your thoughts on that and whether that's a viable thing to do at this stage of the war?
Well, first of all, there's very few nations that fly the MiG-29s, which are the same aircraft that the Ukrainians fly. So the United Kingdom's aircraft would not be able to be offered. And so there are only a few countries who potentially could accept a request by the Ukrainians. I would support the Poles in whatever choice they make. It's those
whether they choose
or not. I mean, those countries are on the borders with Russia and Ukraine to some extent, and so they will face a direct consequence. And so we would protect Poland. We'll help them with anything they need. But if they make that choice, then that's a choice they will have made based on a view of bilaterally helping Ukraine and Ukraine needing those. Now, I think Ukraine should have whatever it can have to protect itself, to defend itself from this naked Russian aggression.
To be clear, then, you would support a NATO member essentially rearming a bordering country against Russia?
Well, I think I would support their choice.
With fighter jets?
All of us in these jobs have to balance the risk of escalation with helping what we see on the ground.
Wouldn't that be too
I am responsible for the security of the United Kingdom and the people, and so is the Prime Minister. And we have to make sure that the consequences of whatever actions we do, lethal aid included, which the Russians have warned there'll be retribution for countries that have done that, is calibrated in the right way to make sure that there's not an escalation into a war across Europe. Poland borders, a number of countries such as Belarus, that is an active participant with Russia in this war. And Poland will understand that the choices it make will not only directly help Ukraine, which I think is a good thing, but also may bring them into direct line of fire from countries such as Russia or Belarus, and they will have to calibrate that. And that's a really big responsibility on the shoulders of the President of Poland and indeed the Defence Minister. And so it's not for me to second-guess their choice, but it is for me as a fellow NATO member to say I will stand by Poland. Poland is our ally, it's been an ally for over 150 years, the United Kingdom. We will support Poland in whatever choice she makes and also whatever she needs as a result of that.
OK, Mr Wallace, let's move on then to the migration issue. Of course, as you know, millions of people on the move. Let's just, I want to show you this picture here that we have that's in a number of the newspapers this morning and that we've been featuring on Sky News. That is the train station at Kharkiv. I mean, you know what that is reminiscent of, don't you, from the 1940s. We can do more to help these people, can't we? Some 300 visas have been given by the UK. 10,000 wants to come here. Can more be done? And what do you think about what you see there at Kharkiv?
Well, look, that's what war in Europe looked like 70 or 80 years ago. It's what war in Europe looks like today. And I think it's why people like me and the Prime Minister were determined to help Ukraine defend itself long before others were, because that was going to be the consequence. We warned many countries in Europe who were not of the view Russia would invade, that the risks were great. Migrant flows are what happens in war. And, you know, we've got used to wars a long way away, where people arrived on these shores and European shores in drips and drabs as they made it across a territory. These people are neighbouring the EU, they're neighbouring Europe, and quite rightly, they're in a city that is surrounded by Russians who are indiscriminately bombing them. Of course we can do more, and we are doing more. And
I mean, it's shameful, isn't it? There's thousands there, and 300 visas have been given.
Well, look, they're processing 17,000. So 17,000 people have applied, and they're being processed at the moment. And we've said over 200,000 people can come here. So the question really relies on how many checks we do once people reach a safe space. So no one is stopping those people getting across their borders into a safe space. And the first and foremost duty for all of us is to make sure those people get to safety.
Yeah.
Once they've got to safety, making sure we just check their identity before they come to this country is incredibly important that we do that. It shouldn't take time. And I've offered, you know, and I will be offering to the Home Office assistance from the MOD in the same way we did not pitting, to increase the processing time to help those people. But of course, you know, we have been incredibly generous and we will continue to be so. We've said over 200,000 people can come to this country.
I mean, 200,000 people can come from Ukraine to
Yes,
the UK.
they can come under there's a range of schemes. There's the humanitarian scheme, there's the family scheme. They can come to this United Kingdom. The key here, and I understand the frustration, is the speed of processing when they get to a safe country.
And that's the problem, isn't it? The speed of processing, because you will know that there have been stories in the past 24 hours of people at the UK border in Calais unable to get across, even though they have every right to come here. Why is that being so difficult?
So I know the Home Secretary is determined to speed that up, and you know the MOD will lean in as we did. So in not pitting, we sent MOD officials to help the processing of identity to make it even quicker. We will play our part in speeding that up. You know, we have people in Poland, for example, in the Ministry of Defence, as does the Home Office. They've done a pop-up visa processing centre. But she recognises there's more to do,
you know,
and she will do more.
What's there at the moment is inadequate. You do admit that, don't you?
Well, look, I've said we can do more there, and we will lean in to do that. You know, this is fast-moving. The first duty is for the government to help people get to safety. And once they're in safe countries, Poland or anywhere else, the next responsibility is to make sure we process them as quick as possible. Of course we can do that quicker. We are leaning into that. The Home Secretary is determined to do that quicker. I will give her all the support I can in making sure it's done as quick as lightning. OK,
Mr Wallace, finally then, President Zelensky is going to address MPs today via video link. He's been described as a lion, a real totem for this war. What kind of moment is that going to be like in Parliament when he speaks to MPs?
I think it's going to be incredibly powerful. You know, President Zelensky, I've met on a number of occasions. You know, he is leading a country at war. I don't think he ever thought when he was elected, as no one else really did, or few people did, that Russia was going to come and decimate his country. You know, he is an amazing guy. He's actually comes across as a very regular person. It's been an incredibly unifying moment for Ukraine. You know, the last president you've just seen on your footage, you know, there's a joke in Ukraine that, you know, Russia has done one thing that the Ukrainian people hadn't managed to, which is unite the former and the current president. You know, that's what happens when you invade a country. President Zelensky is the spirit of Ukraine, which is young, which is liberal thinking, which is outward-facing, which is European. And that's what Russia or President Putin just doesn't understand. This is about values and who we are. This is not about the military threat that was sort of manufactured by Russia to itself. It's about the values. And President Putin doesn't like the values that are represented by NATO and the EU. And that's what he's most angry about.